You are listening to the Serra High School Podcast, your connection to the scholars, the athletes, the men of faith, the men of humility, the Serra Padres. Hello and welcome to the Serra High School Podcast. Today I have the pleasure of having Serra Assistant Principal of Academics, Keith Strange, with us today. Keith will sadly retire in June after an incredible 43 years of service. He will always be remembered for his easygoing attitude, his love of aquatics, and dedication to generations of Serra Padres. His students and colleagues, me included, will miss him, but everyone in the Serra community wishes you well as you begin this exciting chapter. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for asking.
Absolutely. So usually on these podcasts, we like to just kind of start with just your background, where you grew up, where you went to college, what your hobbies are. So if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, I'd love that.
Sure. I grew up in Marin County and went to Terra Linda High School up in San Rafael. After high school, I went to college, went out to Princeton University for a year. It didn't take long for me to get really homesick for California, so I only was at Princeton for a year. But then I transferred to UCLA and finished up my undergrad work at UCLA. Then got my credential at Santa Clara University, and then came directly to Serra. I've been here at Serra for 43 years now.
Excellent. And what was your undergraduate at UCLA? What was that in?
It was in psychology. Yeah. Excellent. So it was interesting. I was in psychology. Psychology was my major, and they didn't give minors at that time. I was taking a lot of math at that time. Math was always something that I enjoyed doing. So when I graduated from UCLA, I decided to become a math teacher. And I was always looking for a place where I could be a math teacher and a swimming coach. So I'll never forget, Mike Peterson interviewed me and asked me, he said, well, we've got a full-time math teacher and a swimming coach position, but we also need a water polo coach, and can you also coach water polo? And I said, back then I was poor and hungry, and I said, yeah, absolutely, Mike, I can do that. You got it. So for my first 22 years here at Serra, I was coaching water polo and coaching swimming and teaching math.
Wow, excellent. And so did you always know that you wanted to be a teacher, or was it in college that kind of sparked your desire?
It was interesting. I think that, certain families have certain family values, and I think that I've had a lot of teachers in my family. Within my family, my dad was a teacher, my grandmother was a teacher, and my cousin was a teacher as well. And so I saw those kinds of values, and giving back to people was something that I always wanted to do. So I had a strong orientation towards service, and teaching seems the natural thing to do.
That's awesome. And what about the aquatics? Did you swim at TL or TL? I'm calling it now. I'm just calling it TL. My cousin went there though, actually.
Oh, no kidding.
I am familiar with that school. So did you swim and play water polo in high school and college? Or?
Swam and played water polo in high school, and was an All-American swimmer and All-American water polo player. First person in our high school to be All-American in those two specific sports. I actually went, sort of fun fact, I'm actually in the Marin County Sports Hall of Fame.
Oh, awesome. When were you inducted?
That was, I think, 2011.
Wow, what an honor.
2015, 2011, I forget exactly which year, but I went in as an athlete, as a high school athlete. And so I was an athlete in high school, swam for a year at Princeton, swam for a year in college at UCLA as well.
Wow, that's so impressive. That's awesome. And so when you graduated, you got your credential, and then how did you stumble upon Serra? I know you talked with Mike Peterson, so I know what swung you here, but how did you find out about it?
Well, it was a job posting. I was getting my credential at Santa Clara, and they had job postings, and so I didn't even know where San Mateo was. I lived in Marin, I went to college in Santa Clara, and had always just sort of passed through San Mateo. Had to look it up on a map and figure out where it was, and so that's what brought me here.
Excellent. And did the all boys, Catholic, education, was that something that you found to be an allure or a challenge, or?
Well, there was something special. There were different kinds of things about Serra. The fact that it was all boys was brand new to me. I was not Catholic at the time. I converted to Catholicism after I'd been at Serra for about 15 years. So I didn't have a strong connection to the Catholic faith, but I knew that I wanted a rigorous high school. I knew that I wanted a school that was going to challenge boys, and also was going to support sort of the holistic view that we have at Serra of realizing that we don't just simply have students and athletes, we have student athletes, and we have students that want to grow in other ways as well.
That's amazing. And so as you came in as a math teacher, what other hats have you worn, and kind of can you give us just kind of a breakdown of everything you've done? Because I know it's been a lot over 4 decades.
43 years, quite a few. Taught math, coached water polo and swimming, ran the swim school for 13 years here in the summer. And that was a huge opportunity for training for administration. We ran about 2,000 kids through the swim school every summer. Wow. Had 50 instructors, so it was like a city. It was running all the logistics involved in something like that, evaluating the teachers, supporting parents, supporting student learning, all of those kinds of things. That was right in the years right before I went into administration. So I did a lot of that. But in Catholic schools, you do pretty much whatever anybody asks you to do. So, back in the late 80s, I was actually involved in HIV education with the kids. I was doing some quasi-counseling kinds of things. That's where my psychology background came in.
Sure.
So you do pretty much anything that's being asked. In administration, I was Dean of Studies for a year, and then I went into my current role. I've been in my current role as academic assistant principal for 20 years.
For 20 years. And throughout that time, what would you say, what have you found to be the most challenging role, and why?
I think the most challenging role, without a doubt, is teacher. You have so many things to do. You have you've got demands coming at you. It's such a challenging experience. And back then, too, when I first started off in teaching, there was very little support for us. We had to sort of manufacture our own support systems and support each other. So that is, without a doubt, the hardest thing that I've had to do. People sort of look at my role right now and they say, well, isn't administration the hardest role? I work with some great people, and the school is in such great hands. Even though I'm leaving now, I look at Barry, I look at Charlie, I look at Rita's taking over my role. There's just great support for people, and the school's really in a good position.
That's great. Well, I know that they would say the same about all of the training that they've received from you, so that's great. And so in the last 40 years, you've seen many, many changes. Can you just identify a few of the core things that remain the same at Serra?
Sure. I think what has remained the same for 40 years, from my standpoint as an employee of the school, is the really tight, close connections that we have with each other. I've heard people say that the teaching at Serra is like working with your family, and it's really true. We've got such tight relationships with each other. We realize that we are so dependent on each other to be successful. We can't work in isolation. And so the opportunity to collaborate and to be able to work with others is just great. And I think that's been the biggest constant. There's been a lot of changes from the student standpoint, but I think that's number one. And I think probably a close second is the great support that we've had from parents. Parents have changed through the years, but the support that they give for teachers and for us as administrators, I take a look at the tremendous gifts that people have given, and the great support that the teachers have provided for all of us has been a constant.
It is pretty amazing, just as a community as a whole. You rarely see so many people, the buy-in for the mission, right? I mean, there are so many, like all the people, the teachers, the students, the parents. I mean, the community as a whole is really driven to succeed as a whole, and that's a really beautiful thing to watch.
It's a beautiful mission too. When we look at how we've monitored or adjusted the mission through the years, the previous mission that we had talked about students sort of being fully formed adults, and it was modified and softened a bit to reflect this journey that kids go through. And when they come to us as as new ninth graders, barely out of middle school. They're like puppies. They're kids that just have so much to learn and so much to grow, and they don't know what they don't know yet. And so they rely on the support of the older kids, the older Padres, the seniors, in order to learn what it's like in high school. And by the time they get to be seniors, they're just so poised, and they're just so amazing. We're going to have graduation in just a few days, and I look at the strength and the courage and the poise that these kids have, and it's amazing. I certainly didn't have that when I was their age.
Definitely. I mean, it really is. You do watch that transformation, from freshman to senior year. And what can you tell me a little bit more about the mentorship, the brotherhood aspect of Serra? Like you had said, the upperclassmen kind of really, take care of the lower classmen. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it's really built in the fabric of Serra. I think it is built in the fabric of Serra. I think when we take a look at how the boys, the seniors are there for them. They tell them, that's not appropriate. That's not the kind of behavior that we want to have continue to be part of our brotherhood. I think the Mission and Brotherhood program it does a great service in that way, that they provide an opportunity and a venue for older boys to mentor younger students, and I think that's great. The other thing I'm going to say, too, is I've been at Serra long enough that a lot of the kids that are coming in now, I've taught their dads or coached their dads. And, the number of times that I've seen parents come up, whether it be at open house or at an admissions event, and they say, hey, Mr. Strange, you remember I had you in algebra back in '92 or whatever it was. And I think that the connections that these adults have for bringing their sons to Serra, it's not the same school as it was when they were here. It's a different school, but it's also a better school. And I think that they recognize the common elements, which are the brotherhood and the connections and the spirit and the faith. All of that is something that they want for their boys as well. That's interesting. My family is living proof of that. My brothers both went here, and my nephews have both gone through the program. My son is here, and it's fun to have them at the games supporting, their kids and my son, and seeing the difference, but also highlighting the tradition and all the values because they definitely, the one thing I've always said about my brothers and my son and my nephews is you learn to critically think here. I mean, it's amazing the way that they can present an argument and support it, or, it's pretty unique to this program, I think.
I agree.
It's something that I think is in every classroom, which is every subject. It's not just a one, critical thinking class or whatnot.
Yeah, it's not just, okay, guys, today we're going to talk about critical thinking.
Right.
It's not an add-on. It's incorporated. It's infused into everything that we do.
Absolutely.
And it's one of several sort of core ideas. When I think about the strengths of the school, I think, from an academic standpoint, obviously, I've worked in both on the student life side and in sports, and I've also been in teaching and now in administration. I see the tremendous commitment that the kids have, and you see it when you talk to them, and they know it. I've had people say, you can have a group of 10 kids in a crowd, and you can pick the Serra kids out of the bunch.
That's pretty amazing. Can you talk to me a little bit about the connection between the teachers and the coaches and the students? There is a relationship there that I see so frequently between, it's different than what you see in other places. It's very unique.
And I would, I'm going to have to, say, my only experience has been what it's been like here. I haven't worked at another high school. I've been to other high schools. I've seen other high schools. But I do think that the connections that we have, so many coaches are also teachers. It's helpful to see the kids in more than one venue. And I remember back in the years when I was coaching, and I would have kids in the classroom, and I would have kids in the pool deck, and I think when I saw them in both ways, you do form stronger connections to them, and those connections, as much as I would like to say that I had a huge impact on kids, and that I don't think there's going to be any kids that are going to graduate and say that. Well, listen, I remember when Mr. Strange taught me the factoring method, or the quadratic formula. That's not what the kids will remember. What they'll remember is the connections that they make, and the connections they make with the teachers and with the coaches. When you have both of them together, I think it's even stronger.
It's just an additional trusted adult, that's vested in your success, right? That's pretty amazing. Okay, so tell me a little bit about the decades. If I were to ask you let's think of like maybe top 3 things that you remember as being, I don't know, pivotal change points, like large, moments in history that changed, that year. I mean, it's a really broad question, but I'm thinking over the last 40 years, there are a lot of things that, could impact 800 boys.
Sure. Well, I started in '79, so I'll start with the '80s. I think when you think about the country in the '80s, it was a time of turmoil. This is also sort of the pre-internet age, So you think about what it was like as a teacher to sit in the classroom, and kids didn't have computers. Kids, it was rare that you found computers. Kids would type their papers, on a typewriter. It's a very different kind of world, and there was no internet. So the ubiquitous nature of information, it wasn't there. And so I think of that time as sort of a slow time, but it was also a time when teaching was sort of back to basics. So when you think about what Serra was like at that time, you had to have teachers that really engaged kids in conversations, and so the conversational nature of instruction back then was huge. I think in the '90s, that's a time of technological revolution. The internet's coming in the '90s, and so now there's this great tool out there, and people don't know how to use it.
Right.
So we, and again, technology wasn't as widespread as it is now. Then in the early 2000s, that's around the time. I moved into administration in 2001, literally months before 9/11.
Oh, wow.
And so when you think about the impact, I'll never forget 9/11. And just a real dark time in our country's history, but also a really challenging time to be running a school. And that was just really challenging. But then that was the time that we went into administration. So from my role, I transitioned into a position where I was more of a leadership position in the school, where you develop new instructional programs, where you start to address rigor in the classroom. So we started to really invest in professional development for our teachers. And then around 2010, I guess, was the time that we became a Google school, and we developed and we transitioned to a new schedule. So we abandoned the Float 8 schedule, which I know a lot of graduates were very dismayed about. But the things that we've been able to accomplish with this schedule far outshadow any benefits that we had from the Float 8s. So it's, when I take a look at how our school changed and how students changed, you think about those technological changes, the introduction of the internet, the transition to a Google school, all those different kinds of things. I think it's had a huge impact on students' lives.
Sounds like Serra really had to adapt. I can only imagine. You must have had so many teachers that weren't familiar with, the internet kind of took us all by a storm, right?
Right.
In terms of, I remember getting my first email address in college, right? So,
right.
It's just, it's amazing. I've seen the way that Serra adapted to the pandemic, but how was it adapting to that technology boom?
Yeah, and probably the last transition, the other significant event is the global pandemic of the last 3 years, and you take a look at how we had to transition our school from a totally in-person instructional model to something that had distance learning, and then had hybrid, and it's tremendously challenging teaching in this type of environment. I just as an aside, I remember that one of the things that I do on the outside is I do some tutoring on the outside, and some test preparation instruction. And so I work with an outside organizations based in Southern California. We're spread all over the state. And when in early March 2020, right as we were about to shelter in place, we had a 2-hour faculty in service on Zoom. Up to that, I think you could probably count on one hand the number of teachers that had ever heard of Zoom. Right. Within a week, everybody was teaching on Zoom. And so the commitment of our teachers in order to do that. Well, this organization I work with on the outside, I'll never forget, they called me and they said, listen, all of our classes are canceled. We have to do our classes by remote. Keith, do you know anything about Zoom? And I said, well, I've had a 2-hour in-service on Zoom. They said, great, you now have 2 hours more experience than any of the rest of us do. So you're now our expert. Right. And not only that, but you're also going to be our trainer. Oh, so I went from being no pressure, and that was sort of typical. Every week, almost every day, you had to do something new. You identified a new issue that you had to address, and so that's sort of the last 3 years, and thank goodness we've been able to get more or less past that to the point where now we're sort of living with COVID, and we're somewhat stable.
Yeah, the administration at Serra, definitely, you guys did such an amazing job in reacting and pivoting and moving forward and finding new ways to do things better. I mean, that's hard to do when you're trying to also, educate. You've got the curriculum that was planned as well, right? So right. Can't really pivot on that.
Our teachers were tremendous during that, and I think that's one of the reasons why the school has remained a force. The school has remained a strong influence on education in the peninsula.
Absolutely. And since we did just talk about the challenges, let's talk a little bit about the highlights of the time that you've been here. I know that you've got to have some moments to stick out, whether it's, a team winning a title, or whether it's just a shift in curriculum that you were really proud of. Can you tell us something about that?
Well, I think, sort of chronologically, when I think about from an athletic standpoint, we had some great teams in the 80s and 90s. That I was really proud to be able to coach. Our swimming team in ¡86 placed second in CCS and had some tremendous athletes. One of the athletes that was on that team is now an Olympic swimming coach. We had two swimmers on that team that ended up swimming in the Olympics in Seoul, Korea. Wow. And then our water polo teams a few years later in the 90s were just they were a force to be reckoned with. We had a number of years where we made the CCS semifinals years in a row. We also had a swimmer, Leffie Crawford, who was national champion in the late 90s, and we set a national record in his senior year. So from an athletic standpoint, those are some of the highlights that I think of. And from an academic standpoint, I think the changes that I've seen in our school haven't been just the result of one particular thing. There are like 20 different things that all sort of feed into one. So, the fact that we were able to continue to push on technology through the years, but technology not as a goal in itself, just as a tool to help facilitate higher learning. Our AP pass rate has gone when we first went into my role, our AP pass rate was about 25%, which is about half the national average. Now it's about 25 points above the national average. Also the transition to the new schedule, like I mentioned, leaving the float eighth and going to the modified block has enabled a whole bunch of other things to happen. And our investment in professional development has been a key part of that as well. When I first took over, our annual budget for professional development was only $5,000 a year, and now it's more like $150,000 a year. And that continues to fuel conversations and change. We've had some great success stories within our departments. I'm so proud of the hires that we've made, and I'm fortunate now to have been part of the hiring process for more than half of our faculty, and the fact that we continue to make a school that is relevant and that teachers want to come back to. When I'm recruiting new teachers, one of the things that I tell them is this is the place where you're going to want to stay. So if you want to be here, you're going to if you continue to do the job, if you continue to enjoy your time here, you're going to want to stay here for a long time. So we have a lot of longevity in our faculty,
which is great. I mean, that's what keeps the machine moving. When you just wanted to ask you a little bit when you said, like, how do you, I guess, assess your curriculum and how to remain current and relevant and how to continue to, what's the cycle on that or what's the process? Forgive my ignorance.
Well, that's okay. Sure. I think the cycle of, I work very closely with the department chairs, and we involve our department chairs in high-level discussions in academic council. We meet twice a month, and we discuss major relevant issues that not only affect their individual departments, but affect the whole school. So that is sort of the professional development committee that we have. We continue to look at, where do we want to go as a school? So we talk about how to teach critical thinking. We talk about data literacy. We talk about information literacy. We talk about differentiating instructions. During the pandemic, we talked about how we were going to implement a hybrid learning model. And so those discussions take place from an administrative standpoint between myself, Charlie, our principal, Rita, our dean of studies, and in my role as academic assistant principal. We have the higher level discussions that then filter down to the department chairs that we then filter down into the individual departments. And then the professional development plan supports teachers developing things from there, supports teachers' growth in those kinds of things. But that doesn't happen if you don't have a creative and a growth mindset. And that's the growth mindset that we have within our faculty. We're always, when we're interviewing potential new teachers, we're thinking, what is this person going to be thinking about doing in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? And how does we discuss with them what is our vision for the growth of the school. And so I know that Rita talks about as doing all this work with the Center for Design and Innovation with Serra Global. These are 21st century topics, and they don't happen when you have people that are just willing to go the status quo, right, willing to do the same thing every single time. You need to have creative, highly influential people, persuasive people. To do things like that. And you take a look at our expansion of course offerings over the last 10 years too. It's amazing. It's hard to believe that some of these things are relatively new. Because they're part of our DNA now. Right. They're part of what we do.
That's really exciting. I know that there's a lot of very exciting things going on, and I think that by continuing to analyze and critique the program, you always better it every single time. So that's great. Can you tell me a little bit about what do you think? I mean, Sarah's, we've got a lot going on this summer. We have a lot going on next year. Where do you see Serra like in 5 years? I mean, what are your predictions?
Well, first of all, I'm going to be watching. I've told Rita that I'm on her speed dial. If she needs my help for anything, she's welcome to have it. But that being said, you've got some great leaders that are going to be looking at Serra Global, making connections. I think one of the things that came out of the pandemic was the realization that the classroom doesn't have to be the physical classroom space that we have, that our global classroom connects to kids in other countries where you get different kinds of mindsets and different kinds of points of view. I think that's where our school is going to be able to make connections outside the classroom. I think also when you take a look at keeping our school faith program relevant, that's a real challenge these days. Kids have so many demands on their time, and so many of those demands do not focus on wellness. They don't focus on student holistic growth. And kids have tremendous challenges in their times, on their schedules, in their lives today, and it's not easy being a teenager today. And so I think that one of the things that we will do as a school, that Serra will do as a school, it's not going to be me anymore, but it's going to be Serra, is to continue to be a positive force for change in kids' lives and to be able to provide that centered groundedness. I think, that when I think about my experiences at Serra, I mentioned that I converted to Catholicism about 15 years in, and so now when I take a look at that, it's my faith is very important to me. And, so when I take a look at planning for retirement, I take a look at things that I've done over the last 5 or so years. I've been on I think 4 different Kairos, or maybe 5 different Kairos retreats. Kairos is a gift from the school to students and also to parents, because it's a week where kids unplug, where they connect with each other, they connect with their faith, and they connect with their families. And I think that is so important for kids today. So I'm really glad that program is there. I've loved my experiences on Kairos. I recommend to every faculty member. Have you done Kairos yet? Have you done it? You need to do it. And it's an opportunity for kids to really unplug and connect with their faith.
That's amazing. And I know that I think I heard in a meeting recently you had volunteered for another one.
Yeah.
So I think that's wonderful.
Well, I told them that, I told Billy Burns, our campus minister, I said, Billy, if you're, it's sometimes, you have somebody who's sick or comes up positive with COVID or can't do it. And if I can help with that, I'd be glad to do that. It's important that the people that are on Kairos are connected with the kids. So, that's something that I think there's a sort of a narrow window over the next year or two when that would be valuable. Beyond that, they need to see their faculty members. They need to see their administrators. They need to see their coaches. They need to see their staff members as the Kairos. Oops, sorry about that. As our Kairos moderators.
That's amazing. Well, it's a very special connection, and I think that's great that you've done it so much. Keith, you've been such a voice of reason, you're so intelligent, and you have such great ideas, and you have such a great way of delivering all of your content, honestly, and you will be missed. What will you miss most about Serra?
Oh, the connections with faculty more than anything else. Being able to come to work every day, and there's the cliche, if you enjoy your work, you'll never work a day in your life. I've been really blessed to be able to make really close friends here at Serra, and I'll still stay in touch. But being able to see them on a daily basis it'll just have to change.
Yes, definitely.
That's what I'm going to miss.
I'm sorry that we'll miss you too. But what are your plans for the future? I know that you've got a home in New Hampshire. What are your plans?
Sure. So Patty and I bought a home in New Hampshire near her son. And near her daughter and her grandson, and so I'm going to spend a fair amount of time. It's a fixer-upper, so it's something where I'm going to probably spend more time than I would like involved in fixing it up. I don't put a hammer in my hand and expect the nail to go in straight. But we're going to spend a lot of time in New Hampshire. I'm expecting to spend a lot of time with family. All of my kids are here in the Bay Area. That's the one drawback, is that the school swallows up so much of my time. I'm really looking forward to being able to have some time to connect with my kids and with my grandkids. And we'll spend time in New Hampshire as well, because that's Patty's one grandchild. So she's going to want to make sure that we're definitely present out there.
Watch every moment.
Watch every moment, right? So it's a small town. It's a very rural type community, and it is such a different change of pace from the Bay Area. And so I'm looking forward to having that contrast with what my current lifestyle is.
And it's sort of cold in the winter, so we might see you around January. Come back here for a little sunshine.
It's cold in the winter. It's 80 degrees today, so it's it's one extreme to another.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough for your time. It is such a pleasure to speak with you. You have so much wonderful history to share with us all, and I'm wishing you all the best in your future, and I hope to see you back frequently. So.
Thank you, Amy.
Absolutely. Now, we do leave on a Go Padres, so say what you want to say, but then you have to do a nice steady Go Padres at the end.
Well, I think the school is in such great shape, and I think you have such great leaders here in the school. So I'm gonna say siempre adelante, Go Padres.
Awesome. Thank you.